咱们把上期的那个我们上期的课做那个呢，先稍微复习一下，好吧？我们先看一个这个视频。
class, and we're going to cover the construction of cylindrical and conical forms in 1 and 2 point perspective. Here you can see I've got sketches in 1 point perspective of cylinders and one vertical cone, where we have our horizon line, our vanishing point, and what we need to be aware of when we're sketching these volumes is the degree of the ellipses, which are circles in perspective. If you have a cylinder pointing directly at you, remember, the front face is square to us, then that feature will just be a circle. But when we have a vertical cylinder and we have a horizontal cylinder, say, laying left to right, we then have to be aware of how open the ellipses are in order to draw these features accurately. I'm going to use a glass here to help explain what we would see in reality, and that helps us with our sketching. As we know, when we look straight down at the glass, the rim of the glass is a circle. So if I place the rim of this glass so that it is at my eye level and just sit that on the horizon line, as I drop the glass below my eye level, you can see how what we call the minor axis of the ellipse starts to become longer. And the further I drop that below my eye level, the more it opens up. And if we have a look at the sketch of a vertical cylinder, you can see that the ellipse that is closer to the horizon line or our eye level is a lot flatter, and it opens up the further that surface is below our eye level. If I now turn this glass horizontally and place the rim of that glass directly below the vanishing point, it's a straight line. As soon as I shift that glass to the right of my view, we will see that ellipse opening wider. Look at the sketch of a cylinder laying on its side, left to right. We can see that the ellipse, or the surface that's closest to the vanishing point, is thinner than the ellipse that's further away from the vanishing point. And these are the things that we want to be aware of when we're sketching circles in perspective. So taking that information on board, I'm going to take you through sketching some cylinders and cones in 1 point perspective. Let's draw a vertical cylinder to start off with. The way I'm going to do that is I'm just going to drop a vertical line straight down from the vanishing point. So I'm basically going to draw a rectangle where this is the center, the vertical center. Vertical lines perpendicular to the horizon line, just like what you've done prior to this. And then we're going to project each of those corners back to the vanishing point. A circle fits perfectly inside a square, so I'm going to visually proportion this face as a square, and then I'm going to project up the corners to determine my top face. They should intersect these converging lines at the same point, and this will be a horizontal line. Okay, so there's my top surface, my bottom surface, and I know I have to fit ellipses inside those surfaces. If I cross my diagonals, I'll be able to find the center of those squares, and on the center line, that gives me the tangent points. This midpoint is the perspective center of that square, but we do know that an ellipse is going to be symmetrical, so even though I'll divide this and mark these 2 points on that horizontal line, by the time I draw in an ellipse, I'm hoping to achieve a perfectly symmetrical ellipse. So I'll do that to the top and bottom faces. Then it's a matter of just drawing in your ellipses at the top, nice and light, and ellipse at the bottom. To finish off the construction of the cylinder, I do vertical lines at the tangents of those ellipses, and then I can come in with heavier line weight to define my cylinder as a solid. Important thing to remember is that the minor axes, the short distance of the ellipses, and the major axes are always 90 degrees to each other. So there's our vertical cylinder in 1-point perspective. And I'll even add a little bit of hatch shading just to show volume. I'm going to have a light source coming from the top left, and I'm just going to hatch out this side, or this part of the cylinder. Drawing a cylinder lying on its side, left to right, so basically just drawing a box in 1-point perspective. I know the ellipse are circles. In reality, they're just in perspective, and the circles sit inside squares. So I'm going to use this more open face to determine that as a square, and if I'm happy with that proportion, I can just project these across, and there's my left face. I apply the same geometry, crossing my diagonals to find center, dividing through, there's my tangent point. If I project through here, through that center line, there are my other two tangent points for my ellipse. Do the same on the left face. Not doing anything particularly difficult, I'm just applying what we know, and that is crossing the diagonals to find the center of a square or a rectangle, as we know that works. But it'll give me my tangent points for where my ellipses need to be. Then we drop in our ellipses, and then just drop your ellipses in. The square will determine how open it is, your ellipses are, and then it's a matter of determining the sides of that cylinder, which will be the tangent points to those ellipses. They should be horizontal and parallel to the horizon line, and then come in and define the object as a solid. A little bit of hatch shading. Light source from the right. And this is indicating that this part of the cylinder turns down, away from the light. A cylinder lying on its side pointing towards us would give us a face that's square to us. Remember, we're in 1-point perspective, so I'm just going to draw a square. Cross our diagonals to find midpoint, divide vertically and horizontally, gives us our tangents. Do it to the front as well. All we have to remember is in 1-point perspective, that front face is square to us, so it's essentially just a circle. Tangents would go directly back to vanishing point, and then heavy line weight to define the object as a solid. Little bit of shading, maybe just on this side where light would be turning away. Sorry, that part of the surface would be turning away from light. Okay, Let's do some cones. Cross my diagonals to find the midpoint. Divide horizontally. And then through the midpoint, project straight through. And that should give me my tangents. The point of the cone, similar to square-based pyramids, is just straight down. Drop in an ellipse that touches those four sides. And I want to make sure that the major axis of this ellipse is horizontal. And tangent to point, tangent to point. Heavier line weight to define the object as a solid. A little bit of shading. I'm just being consistent in terms of my light source coming from the top right. So the exercise requirement for 1 point perspective cylinders and cones is to do a A3 page with a horizon line and vanishing point, and of course fill the page with sketches. All of these views are drawn below the horizon line. I do want to see you explore different angles, above, below, with your sketches at eye level. Let's do one here. So let's say I want to draw a cone pointing in that direction. And this is going to be at eye level. Face here looks like a square. I cross my diagonals. So I drop in my ellipse. I throw my tangents to that point. And all of these lines that I'm showing, these are all construction lines. I want to see all these construction lines. Nice and light. You'll have to practice your control and your line weight. And then come back with heavier line weight to define the object as a solid, and then a little bit of hat shading. Maybe I'll do just one more cone here, pointing upwards. And again, I'll use heavier line weight on the left edge here, left side. And maybe just keep this one a little bit lighter because light source from this direction. Choose where it may be turning away from light and then just hatch that out. So what you should be able to recognize is that ellipses that are close to the horizon line are flatter, and then as we get below or further away from the horizon line, the minor axes of ellipses will open up. Okay, and as you draw any elliptical feature to the right of the vanishing point, they will open up the further away they are to the right and to the left. The last thing I'm going to do is just to describe the axes, just in red pen, just to drive home something that I want you to be aware of, and that is these lines describe the minor axes and the major axes, and they are always 90 degrees to each other. So regardless of what orientation you're drawing your ellipses, we should see this relationship where there's the major axes, here's the minor axes, and they are 90 degrees to each other. Okay. Same through here, last one. Major axes of the ellipse, minor axes of the ellipse. 90 degrees. Don't draw these axes in, they're just there for you to be aware of when you are sketching, so that we get the correct orientation of ellipses. Hi again everyone, this is the second week 3 demonstration video for our workshop class, and in this session we're going to cover 2-point perspective construction of vertical and horizontal cylinders and cones. Looking at this example here, I just wanted to point out some characteristics in relation to constructing these cylinders in 2-point perspective. So with a vertical cylinder, because we know that the top and bottom surfaces are going to be ellipses, we must be wary of proportioning the top and bottom faces as squares. And you can see I've done that here. The original construction of this box is in estimated 2-point perspective, so I'm drawing it without the horizon line or vanishing points on the page. We do need to get to that as soon as we can. You do practice learning construction with the horizon line and vanishing points, but then it's important to try and shake those off so that you can start to estimate your perspective. You can see that my lines that converge to the left appear like that they may meet at a point somewhere off the page to the left, and similarly to the converging lines that go off to the right. Vertical lines stay vertical in 2-point perspective, and the center line, which is also a vertical line, we know the minor axis of the ellipse lives on that, and 90 degrees too. That minor axis will be the major axis. So the major axis is horizontal to our view. If we come across to the horizontal cylinder, you can see that the front and rear faces are proportioned to be squares. The more accurate you can get those proportions to be, the more accurate your ellipses are going to be. We also have a center line. This center line goes through the midpoints of both the front and rear faces, and that converges to the vanishing point to the right, as all other lines that are parallel to it, they also converge to the vanishing point to the right. You can see that on the center line, we know that the minor axis must sit on that center line, and 90 degrees to that axis, or that center line, must be the major axis of that ellipse. So let's create or recreate these sketches together, and I'll show you the process. Okay, so to speed up the process, I've just taken the liberties of constructing a vertical and horizontal box in 2-point perspective. You can see I've proportioned the top face and the bottom face to be square. I've tried to have my converging lines to the left and right vanishing point believable, and that's also in the vertical as well as the horizontal perspective. You don't have to put the arrows in, I'm just indicating those for you to be aware when you construct your boxes and converge your lines to vanishing points. Now, if we just start with the vertical cylinder, we can cross our diagonals to find the center on the top and bottom faces. And of course, a line through those 2 points would give us the center line. And it should just be going straight up, and I'm just going to label that CL for center line. I'll do the center line on the horizontal cylinder as well. We're just applying that geometry that we know. It's always the same, but if you miss the steps because you're trying to do a shortcut, especially when you're learning, you'll get your tilt, if you like, of the major axis wrong. So a line through those 2 midpoints should look like it's going to the converging to the vanishing point to the right. And of course, 90 degrees is the major axis, and you can just scribe these in. That's my major axis, just as a guide for when I drop my ellipses in, and this is pretty close to being 90 degrees, that diagonal anyway. Okay, back across to the vertical cylinder. That line, the diagonal to find the midpoint, looks like it's 90 degrees to me, and pretty much the same there. Find our tangent points for the ellipses on the top and bottom faces. We project lines through the midpoint, make sure they look like they're going to the right vanishing point, and we do that in both directions, of course. Okay, and then we have our 4 tangent points for the top ellipse, 4 tangent points for the bottom ellipse. When we drop in our ellipses, we know that the major axis has to be horizontal, so we'll be aware of that. And just get your rotation going and try and get that ellipse to touch the 4 sides of that square. This one will be a bit more open. I'm just lightly finding that rotation until I get an ellipse that touches those 4 sides. We can drop in our verticals to create the body of the cylinder. They will tangent those ellipses on the top and bottom. And of course, that's the construction. And then it's a matter of just defining that with heavier line weight. Finding the tangent points on our cylinder, lying on its side. Remember, vertical lines are just straight up and down and parallel to other vertical lines. These horizontal lines should look like they're going to the left vanishing point to find our 4 tangent points for our ellipse. Be aware of converging lines to vanishing point to the left, and that gives us our 4 points. So we can come in and drop in our ellipses. Major axis we know is 90 degrees, so as a guide we just use that major axis line as a guide, and I'm more concentrating on being able to hit those 4 sides on that front face and trying to get a decent looking ellipse. You can see the back square is a bit more open. My ellipses aren't so great tonight, but it's going to have to do. And then our tangent point, our lines to create the body of the cylinder. This line must look like it's converging to the right vanishing point, top and bottom. Okay, and then of course we're at a stage now where the construction's done, and you can just come in and define the object as a solid with heavier line weight. I guess the last thing we can do is just to communicate a little bit of form with just a little bit of hatch shading. So given that this is a rounded volume, I'm going to assume that there's a light source coming from the top right. This is kind of the width of the body based on where the light source is coming from. So as it turns away from light, I'm just going to indicate a value change to indicate that light at this point of the cylinder is not able to fully illuminate that side or that part of the rolling surface. If it's coming from the right hand side, then this face I could say is in shadow. And this is just to communicate volume because we've already done the construction for it. On a vertical cylinder, light source from the same direction, we could say that this part of the cylinder is receiving light. Possibly around here is about where the light is not able to illuminate the surface that's rolling away from it. I just do a light construction line straight, and then I can hatch through that area. And you can see I still want it to appear to be a sketch. I've mentioned a few times, you don't have to be an illustrator or a finished artist. We just want to be able to visualize or sketch our ideas so that they are understandable. And that's quite understandable as a cylindrical form. So even though I was using estimated perspective for the demonstration, the exercise requirement this week is for you to use a horizon line and 2 vanishing points and a page full of sketches of 2-point perspective cylinders and cones. Please remember to have your vanishing points as far away from each other as possible. That way you've got less chance of drawing with exaggerated, distorted perspective. And just wanted to confirm, like I did with the 1-point perspective cylinders and cones, just to remind yourselves that the center line that goes towards the vanishing point, that's where the minor axis lives, and always 90 degrees to that is the major axis of the ellipse. In a vertical cone or cylinder, that center line will be perpendicular to the horizon line, and on that center line will be the minor axis of the ellipses, and 90 degrees will be the major axis of the ellipses. What I'd like to see you do is construct various cylinders and cones, again exploring the different angles of view. So drawing close to the left vanishing point, close to the right vanishing point, above, below, and through the horizon line. Okay, so good luck, and I look.
这个看完就可以了啊。好，我们又重新复习了一下这个圆柱体 cylinder and cone 的这个画法，对吧？好，下面呢，同学们拿出纸和笔啊。我刚才老师发给你们一个杯子的照片啊，那我们就来实际演示一下，我们实际来画一下，好吧？我们把这个杯子照片打开，自己在自己的电脑上面打开，好吧，做一个参考。然后老师会带你们去画这个，老师带你们去画一个啊。好，这边打开了，对吧？然后然后呢，我们打开这个杯子这个照片以后呢，好，我们来画这个杯子啊。好，我们来画这个杯子啊。这个杯子首先呢，我们把它的这个高度和宽度啊 ，first of all, every time we draw something, we need to make sure the outline of the object. Normally, it's we can make sure the high and wide 啊，这个是最宽的地方，对吧？杯口是最宽的地方。As here is the widest position place, and here is the narrowest. 最宽的和最窄的，对不对？我们看到这个杯子，它是一个这样的一个形状，对不对？然后呢，我们用一个对称线、对称轴去找它啊，就是这个 axisymmetry 啊 ，axisymmetry，我们去找它。这两个是对称的，对不对？是对称的啊，我要搞清楚。这个是最基本的，如果这个不对称的话，那我们这个杯子你再怎么画的漂亮，它最后都是个错的。所以这个 modeling 一定要准确啊。We made correct modeling。好，我们把这个定好以后，调整一下啊，我们大概量一下，哎，怎么量呢？我们可以用笔量啊，用笔量。好，可以的。这个我们不需要用尺子去量啊，我们一定要训练我们的眼睛。We're training our eyes to observe the scale of the object。我们一定要学会用眼睛去观察物体的这个比例啊，比例关系，好吧？然后去慢慢的，我们眼睛就会越来越准确的去确定这些比例关系，对不对？我们不能老是要借助尺子啊。We don't always to dependent of the toes 啊 depend on our toes. It's a lazy way 啊，这个是个很懒的方法，而且没办法画好画的啊。好，我们把这个边界先画好。边界画好以后，我们发现上面这个杯口的宽度，我们把它定一下啊。上面杯口的宽度我们定一下，还要再大一点啊。这个时候怎么样？我们要注意啊， 近大远小的近大远小的问题啊，近大远小的问题，在我们画杯口的时候，肯定是前边的这个半径要比这个半径要大，对不对？对不对？啊，所以这个杯口是在这个地方的话，我们要把杯口的这个一个 perspective，we should make sure the correct perspective of this the cups open wait open place， 在这个开放的这个地方啊，我们确定一下，然后我们再把杯底去确定一下，杯底这个地方都看到这么大，那这里是不是离我们的视平线更远呀？那么如果是这里离视平线近的话，是这么一个距离的话，那么这里离视平线更远，是应该更大还是更小啊？大家想一想，它离我们的视平线更远，而且在它的下面，离它更远，它应该更大还是更小？这个直径看上去是不是应该比它更大呀？对不对？啊，是不是应该比它更大，对吧？那么我们如果是这边是这么个距离的话，那么我们可能这个地方就要更大一点。这个大倒也未必说是这个距离的大啊，而是说看上去它的这个比例更大。So it looks this scale is bigger than this scale is correct. 啊，我们要观察一下上下的这个位置，让它看上去的比例是对的就可以了。我们不是去量，不是用尺子去量啊。We should make sure the people say or walks and they can say this part is bigger than here. That's a correct perspective. 对吧？这个透视就它比它还要大啊，它比它还要大，那这才是我们应该看到的一个透视比例透视关系啊。好，这个时候我刚才说了，对不对？把的这些所有的顶角的地方 ，we should make some target point 啊，我们要做一个切线，对不对？做一个切线。那么这个地方呢，我们可以看成是这么一个透视，对不对？如果是一点透视的话啊，像这个杯子就是做一个一点透视就可以了啊。OK，我们把这个一点透视画出来啊。我们现在是不是倒推啊？To return from the cross, return to find out the square perspective，对吧？我们倒推回来这个方形的透视点啊，这边也是的，对不对？啊，那么如果是这样倒推的话，那么这个地方透视点是在这儿，我们找到它这个透视点了。那么是不是这个 vanishing point is here? We find the vanishing point here. So this way is the same way. We need to connect these 2 points together and find the correct perspective. 对不对？我们是这样找的，对不对？我们应该这样找。有什么我们可以去反推的，对不对？通过我们的中心点去反推，找到我们的 vanishing point 啊。We are looking for the vanishing point, the same vanishing point. You this way 啊 we can return back it. 好，那这样量好了以后，我们就可以去画这个圆口了，对不对？同样的啊，连圆滑的线啊，去连圆滑的线，对吧？看，不要出现尖角，只要不出现尖角，你要一画这个直线，它出现尖角了，哪怕画稍微圆一点的线，这还是个尖角，对不对？那从这儿，你如果这样画的话，到这个地方它还是个尖角，我们一定要把这个圆，你看，要画圆顺，对不对？哎，不要出现长直线啊，一定要从这个两个圆的倒角的这个位置啊 ，we can draw it from this target line and curve it smoothly, a little bit, gradually to curve it， 逐渐的去旋转它，逐渐的去慢慢的就旋转过来，是不是这个椭圆形就出现了呀？这个椭圆形就出现了，对吗？下面这个也是啊，下面这个也是啊。一旦你出现尖角了，你肯定画错了啊，马上重新去调整它啊。Never draw a sharp corner here. Never. 好，这样的下面这个底座也出来了，对不对？然后我们重新把这个边缘线再连一下啊。We should from this tangent to this tangent to connect these two tangents and to find out the outlet. 是不是啊？这个杯子是不是这样画就非常漂亮了？然后也是透视是非常准确的，对不对 ？It's correct perspective here. 好，我们所有画长形的圆柱形 cylinder 的这种，我们都是这种方法，找到最底口，把它的透视画准确，然后连线，连什么线呢？连这个切线 tangent line connect from this point tangent point to this tangent point 去连线，是吧？这种圆柱形物体我们就会画了呀，对吗？
学习素描，我们可以先从结构素描入手。物体的内在结构决定了它的外形特征，我们抓住物体的结构，才能坚实有力地表现对象的形体。今天我们画一个造型相对简单的马克杯，画之前，我们先要仔细观察物体，分析它的结构。之前画过的陶罐、牛奶瓶等物体，我们都是先把物体概括为一个长方体。这次我们依旧用长方体来概括，不过要用2个。在画面上定好上下位置，用直线拉出透视线，画出一个带2点透视的长方体。一开始画的时候，手拉线条的感觉可以松弛一些，在纸面上画出清淡松软的线条。等到结构线、辅助线画得多了，物体的结构逐渐肯定，我们再加大手上的力度，画出色泽深且准确而肯定的线条。也可以用橡皮擦掉一些多余的线条。画出米字格，先对角连线，对角线交叉点就是中心点。有网友问我，为什么反复在描结构线？我们画结构素描，就是为了更透彻地分析物体的比例、形体与结构。结构线、辅助线都透露出了我们分析物体的思考过程。特别在画复杂物体较长的过程中，之前画的结构线渐渐变淡，看不清了，那么就需要重新勾画一下，让我看得清晰，才能把各个部分结构逐渐画准，保留结构线、辅助线、透视线，能够强调物体的空间感和三维深度感。先切分出底面的圆形，再画出顶面的圆形。现在你应该看出来了，我们画的只是马克杯杯身的部分，先忽略了那个手柄。 画素描时可以像这样，用铅笔当作尺来测量物体各边的长度与比例。接下去要在大长方体的边上画一个小长方体，可以理解成杯身刚好能装进大长方体里，杯子的手柄刚好塞进了小长方体里。画出手柄的曲线走势。注意手柄是有厚度的，这个结构一定要画清晰。慢慢细化轮廓线。如果觉得这个视频对你有用，请给我一颗小心心。
应粉丝要求今天咱给大家讲一下这个五边形多面体，也是这个12面体的画法。这个角度呢，咱们能看到它的10条边大致形状近似球体，注意每条边相对应的线，格点相连形成的五边形与中心五边形各边方向一致。下面咱们解析一下这个五边形的规律。这个五边形呢，咱们可以得到5组平行线。当五边形倾斜时，这5组平行线为5组透视线。详情请看拆分图解。根据这个原理，我们可以很容易找出透视结构。
实战教学，
我们还是先定出它的上下左右的大小位置，找出这个顶面的这个高度，还有这个五边形的顶边的一个斜度。它的这个宽度呢和底部的宽度基本一致，左右两边的边呢往远处呢有一定的透视变化，然后去连接上下4条边，它的大致外轮廓我们就找出来了。找出外轮廓，我们来去找出它的这个内部五边形的位置。这内部五边形呢和它们格点相连的这个线呢方向是一致的。大致位置定出以后，连接它们的对角线，来求证一下它们的方向。然后呢，根据五边形连接其他的边，我们都根据刚才讲的这个五边形的这5组透视线来去检验一下它们这些线有没有错误。感觉正确的情况下，我们就可以去加强这个看得见的这些边。画这5组平行线的时候，大家的这个力度呢要轻一点啊，不要画太重。画投影的时候用复线。找到这个内部结构的时候呢，也是先找出它的里边这个五边形相互连线，这样就比较容易把它给画出来。如果您感觉我这个方法比较简单实用，希望您能点赞分享，感谢大家的关注。